recently I stumbled upon this podcast called Justice Tech Pros, and apparently I'm the only one that's late to this because they have over 6,200 subscribers on the YouTube alone, and I am hooked on this podcast because it deals with an issue that I'm very interested in. That's the criminal justice system. And it takes you inside the criminal justice system and gives you a perspective that you rarely see unless you're inside the criminal justice system. And I'm happy to be joined by Dominick Crea, the man who hosts that podcast on a regular basis. Dominick, thanks for joining me on the radio this morning.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
So, Justice Tech Pros is the podcast. It's available on YouTube. People can search it. I'm a fan. But tell me, what was your motivation in starting this podcast? What made you want to do this?
Well, to be honest, originally, I have a litigation support firm, whereas we help, counsel in supporting their cases and supporting trials. And unfortunately, I was part of a trial which involved my father where he was wrongfully convicted recently.
Oh.
And that kind of got me wanting to, a little bit of frustration, a little need to vent. And I was trying to figure out how I could kind of appeal to the public because my company doesn't really deal we don't, really get clients that are public-based. We deal with the attorneys and with the law firms and with the legal representation. So, as you said, doing a podcast is very easy nowadays, and I'm not really a radio guy. I had no desire to do it, but in order to kind of educate, I guess, the public and give them an inside look on things that take place that could lead to wrongful convictions and how a lot of times jurors don't see what goes on behind the scenes and they don't see what plays out. And what I was seeing happening is people are often, unfortunately, guilty. They're presumed guilty, not the other way around. I wanted to kind of go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're so right about that. We'll talk with Dominick Crea. He is the founder of the Justice Tech Pros podcast. I don't think people have an appreciation for how many wrongful convictions there actually are. And I recently had the opportunity to talk with someone whose father has been in prison for 25 or 30 years, and he's desperate just to get his father out of prison, who's an old man now. So just so folks understand where you're coming from, your background and your expertise, you're not an attorney yourself, right?
Correct. No. Just I'm a paralegal where we work in a supportive fashion for the attorneys. So we just help them with the litigation process.
All right. So now, one of the things that drives me crazy, I know a lot of politicians and people in government and this and that, lawyers, judges, and one of the things that drives me absolutely insane is when someone gets a jury duty summons and they ask me, do you know of any way that I could get out of jury duty? If there's anything that makes me want to punch someone in the face, and I'm a nonviolent guy, it's that. The fact that people in this country, many of them, not everybody, but many people in this country refuse to take jury service seriously is something that drives me up a wall. What do you say to people about the importance of jury service, and what can people do in general to make sure that they're better informed jurors?
Well, I think what they have to do is, as you point out, they have to take it very seriously because the truth is, even with, that's where the buck kind of stops. Even with, unfortunately, with wrongful convictions, if the jurors would get things right, they could undo a lot of wrongdoings. I mean, they could see through smoke and mirrors. They could really help defendants. But what I see happen too many times is they're going through the motions. They're not seeing what's taking place, and it's almost as if they just want to get out of there. They're buying into any narrative that's being put in front of them. So I think jurors really have to understand what reasonable doubt is. That's one of the biggest problems I see. They don't comprehend the high threshold that reasonable doubt is, and they're convicting based on, well, I think this guy may be guilty, so I'm going to find him guilty. And that's not how it works. That's really not how it's laid out. It's such a high threshold.
Yeah,
and that's a big problem.
No, you're exactly right. You did an episode focused on the subject of Wikipedia. Now, I think a lot of people are familiar with Wikipedia. They've seen Wikipedia articles pop up in their search engines. How does Wikipedia relate to the criminal justice system?
Well, I got to say, I never realized how nonsensical some of the information is on Wikipedia, because I'll tell you why. I was trying to update certain information as it relates to, as I spoke about with my father. I was trying to update. They had some inaccuracies. So I was trying to update the information with actual court records and court documents. I mean, you figure nothing is more credible than that. And they wouldn't allow the updates. They felt sources such as press releases and books were more credible than court documents, legal rulings, and legal decisions. So I've been going back and forth with them because I need them to explain that logic to me, because it doesn't make sense how that's a more viable source than a rendered decision or something that's factual. And I don't get any clear-cut answers, but one thing I did find out is how it's really controlled. What they did was they shut down the pages that I was trying to update, and they wouldn't allow any other edits to take place.
And you're trying to basically cite primary source material, the things that books, newspaper articles are written about. You're trying to get it from the horse's mouth itself, and they're giving you a hard time. That's
correct. And it's not. And trust me, as a son, I would have a lot of opinion-based things I would
sure.
want to put on
But you're putting facts in there.
But I'm not going to do that. I understand how it works, and it's supposed to be a viable source. So I left personal opinion out of it. I'm just trying to do facts, and they won't even allow that. And they can't give a justifiable reason. So that right there tells me there's more at play on who controls what kind of narratives on Wikipedia.
Yeah. So where does your dad's case stand now? Are you guys appealing? Are you guys where are you guys now with respect to his whole process?
Yeah. Right now, he has to be sentenced, which is going to happen in about 2 weeks. And after the sentencing, then you have 10 days to file the notice of appeal, and then you go through the whole appeal process. So that's where we'll be, probably within, about 3 weeks' time, and then we'll be dealing with that schedule.
Yeah, I mean, your dad's case is a little complicated. I don't want to get into all the details now, but there is a helpful video on the Justice Tech Pros YouTube page, and the title is Steve Crea, a government target, wrongfully convicted, and there's a video that gives a little bit of a primer on how the government wrongly won this conviction, and it's a fascinating case. I can't imagine what your family's been through, or any family that's been similarly affected. Final question, Dominick. Your last episode, Nothing to Lose, you focus on judges and others, but judges that may not do the right thing. What happens to a judge generally if they don't behave properly in the course of a trial?
Well, that's what I think was most concerning. Before I really got to this process, one would think there's some kind of oversight committee or somebody to kind of keep things in order. But unfortunately, as things play out, you really do see the power a judge has. And if you're stuck with a judge who is not fair and unbiased, you're pretty much at their mercy. And then you have to let things play out, and then you have to take it to the next level, which would be the appeal phase. And it's quite frustrating because, if you're sitting there and you're watching these things take place, you're pretty much helpless because everything's in the judge's hands. And if they decide, certain things aren't going to be allowed, or certain accommodations aren't going to be made that could be detrimental to your case, you just have to sit there and allow it. You could object as much as you want, but if they're not going to let things in, or they're going to let things in that kind of hurt you, that aren't really fair and biased, you got a problem.
Yeah,
unbiased, you have a problem.
You're exactly right, Dominick. And I'll close with this. And I think it's so great what you're doing, because so often criminal defendants and family members of criminal defendants get intimidated by sometimes their own lawyers into being quiet and being silenced. And what that leads to is only one side of the story being told, and prosecutors doing whatever they can to poison a jury pool. So I give you a lot of credit for doing this. And I will be monitoring your dad's case. I'll be listening to the podcast, and I hope we can chat on the radio again soon, Dominick.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure, and thank you again for having me on.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure. If you want to comment on any portion of our interview,